Channel memberships and new merch are now available for the channel. Thank you to those who have joined, particularly SM4 and Jim Blaine for reaching conductor and engineer tiers respectively. More on that after this video, but there is a link down below in the video description. In 2005, railroads, particularly BNSF, started installing cameras inward and outward facing to record all sorts of events from the engineer's point of view, from grade crossing accidents, train collisions, among other things. But 1 year later, in 2006, one camera would be used to record what over the years has become one of the most viewed train accidents ever caught on tape. June 13th, 2006, Richmond, California, 8:25 p.m. Pacific Time. At this hour, 3 crew members based out of this yard, an engineer, conductor, and brakeman, go on duty to take a BNSF manifest eastbound on the Stockton subdivision. The train in question was BNSF MRI CBAR 1-13. Yeah, BNSF symbols are quite long and complicated, so for narrative's sake, we will refer to this train as 4059 East. The train consisted of 7 locomotives, 35 loaded cars, and 20 empties. Those locomotives were BNSF-944CW 4059, NREX 5473, a former Conrail SD50, BNSF 1065, also a -9, FURX 8110, a former Burlington Northern SD40-2, BNSF GP30U 2437, still sporting Santa Fe colors, BNSF 7065, an SD40-2 still in Burlington Northern green, and finally a third -9, BNSF 997. 4059 East departed Richmond at 10:35 p.m., initially with only 5 loads and 5 empties, but the train later grew to what we mentioned earlier after it worked Pittsburgh, California, departing from there at 1:50 a.m. the next morning on the 14th, weighing in a total of 5,286 tons and measuring 4,073 feet long. The train was labeled as a key train, as 43 of the cars were labeled as hazmats, although not all of them were loaded. According to the FRA, a key train is meant to remain on the main track until it arrives at its destination, which would be in Calwa, near Fresno. A couple hours later, our second train goes on duty, BNSF USB DPKC 1-11, which we will refer to as 4479 West from here on out. This crew was 1 man less than the 4059 East, with just an engineer and conductor, who both went on duty at 3:45 a.m. at Calwa, California. 4479 West was a unit cement train with 30 loads and 4 -9s for power, being BNSF 4479, BNSF 4715 in a Santa Fe style livery, Norfolk Southern 8967, and BNSF 4576. They depart Calwa just before 5 a.m., weighing 4,109 tons and stretching to a rather small 1,542 feet long. Both trains were now face-to-face on this former Santa Fe main line that was mostly single track with various passing sidings so one could pass the other. One of these was at Kismet at roughly milepost 1024. 4059 East was scheduled to stop on the main line just before the east end of the siding, while 4479 West would cross over onto the siding track. From there, both trains would continue on their merry ways. According to data downloaded from the Wayside Signal System, 4059 East received an approach medium aspect at milepost 1027.2, indicating, according to General Code of Operating Rules, or G-Core for short, the rule system BNSF follows, it stated that he should proceed. prepared to pass next signal not exceeding 40 miles per hour, and be prepared to enter diverging route at prescribed speed. Black box data stated 4059 was traveling at 44 miles per hour in throttle notch 2 from at least milepost 1028. At West Kismet siding, milepost 1026.3, they received an approach aspect indicating proceed, prepare to stop at the next signal. Trains exceeding 30 miles per hour must immediately reduce to that speed. From there, their final aspect could already be seen at East Kismet, being a stop aspect over 9,000 feet away. While the train was now in Notch 1, the black box data still showed the train traveling at 44 miles per hour as it passed the private crossing 7,716 feet prior to East Kismet. The locomotive's alert alarm was reset just over 4,000 feet prior to impact. Speed was still though at 43 miles per hour, and the throttle increased from Notch 1 to 2. Meanwhile, as indicated by an onboard camera installed on BNSF 4479, it passed a diverging approach diverging, or approach slow if you were to ask NORAC, indicated by a double solid yellow signal. This indicated proceed on diverging route not exceeding prescribed speed, through turnout, prepare to advance onto diverging route at the next signal not exceeding prescribed speed through turnout. And at East Kismet, they would have a diverging clear, also known as medium clear if you were to ask NORAC. This can be seen in the video as 4479 rounds a corner, spotting 4059 East there too. At about 5:51 a.m., the two trains collide. Just before impact, the signal aspect for 4479 disappears as 4059 fouls the main, while the engineer of 4059, realizing his mistake, goes into emergency braking. He and the rest of his crew all bailed, while 4479's crew did not. 4479's camera goes blank as its cab is nearly ripped in half from the collision and falls sideways into the dirt. Amazingly, though the crew didn't bail, they all survived. However, the engineer was badly injured, sustaining a fractured pelvis and other internal injuries. The conductor sustained multiple lacerations, contusions, and a possible concussion. Both were hospitalized and later released. As for the two engines behind 4479, they either jackknife or fall on their sides. As for the 4059 East crew, they sustained minor injuries from jumping off their power, but also survived. The engineer sustained bruises, abrasions, and contusions, the conductor suffered a fractured ankle and sprains, and the brakeman also sustained bruises and abrasions. All three were examined and released from hospital. 4059's front plow was torn off and its cab buckled. The engine then toppled over but remained relatively intact. NREX 5473 and BNSF 1065 fall on their sides, with 5473's cab caving in on itself. The remaining power remained upright and were mostly undamaged, except 997, which had a tanker plow through the cab from the sudden stop and the slack action. 2 cars of 4059's consist derail, while 14 derail and spill their cement load from 4479's consist. Total damages of both equipment and track was estimated at $5,324,528. The main saving graces from this accident was that nobody was killed and no hazmat leak or fire was started, a story that unfortunately wasn't the case in another BNSF collision years later, but that's another story. An investigation was launched by the FRA instead of the NTSB, since likely it was because there were no fatalities. Both train crews were interviewed as soon as possible, with the exception of the engineer of 4479 West. The conductor of 4479 West's testimony matched what the onboard camera showed. He stated he thought he heard a mayday call over the radio as his train rounded the corner prior to East Kismet, and estimated they were 2,000 feet from the east switch. When asked why he chose not to jump, he replied that there was not enough time and they were going too fast, contrary to what the crew of 4059 East did. He also stated that following the collision, the crew of 4059 made no attempt to help them. As for the 4059's crew, things would be much different in their interview. The engineer stated he was well rested, not tired, and that he and the conductor were calling signals. By then they had been on duty for over 9 hours until the collision, much less than 4479's crew, who were on duty for a mere 2 hours before impact. The engineer stated when the train left Sharon, milepost 1031.1, they were running on color, quote unquote. In other words, they were following the signals accordingly. The conductor indicated that as the sun was coming up, he was having trouble seeing the approach signal to Kismet, which was at an approach medium aspect. When they got near the west end of Kismet's siding, the engineer stated it went from approach to clear, so he just kept going, track speed. The conductor, however, said he thought he saw the signal fluctuate and asked the engineer if it did or not.
It looked clear.
The brakeman stated he didn't remember what the signal indication was, nor did he call it. As they proceeded, the conductor wasn't paying attention anymore, relying on his engineer as his back was turned to put on some sunglasses. He then turned and noticed they were approaching East Kismet's red stop signal. He asked the engineer about it, but there was no response. He then sat down, where he had a clear view of the signal, and yelled at the engineer,
Hey, that's a red block.
After some dialogue between he and the engineer, the conductor saw the headlight of 4479 West, and quote unquote, that was when they plugged it. In other words, dumped the air and put the train into emergency. He acknowledged they were by a hard yellow at the west end of Kismet, and felt that the engineer did not react quickly enough to the red signal at East Kismet. The engineer stated East Kismet looked red, but didn't specify when exactly he made that determination. The brakeman also stated that with the sunlight, he and the crew could not determine the color of the signal at the east end of Kismet siding, but it also looked red. He then recalled someone asking about it, followed by the conductor yelling at him to go out the back door, and all 3 crew members bailed after that. So, was 4059's crew correct? Well, records showed the engineer of 4059 East was off duty for more than 81 hours, and the conductor was off duty in excess of 48 hours prior to reporting for duty in Richmond. The brakeman was off duty for a mere 12.5 hours. So they were likely still well rested, or appeared to be. The sunlight theory was tested by the FRA, and as you can see from this footage of similarly modeled signals in St. Denis, Maryland on CSX's Capitol subdivision, the sunlight could indeed obscure the signals of these Safe-Tran hooded signals, nicknamed Vaders by rail fans because of its shape, which were also present at the accident site. The experiment was conducted on the morning of June 21st, 2006, in clear conditions virtually identical to those on the accident day, with BNSF-9-1107 as the guinea pig. The results pretty much destroyed the 4059 East's crew's theory about what had happened. The signals were all clearly visible by the representatives of BNSF, FRA, and the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers Union. The signals all worked as intended, and the sun didn't become a factor until 2 minutes after the collision would have occurred. So to sum it all up, the crew was evidently lying, but some people still debate whether their testimony was true or not. To add insult to injury, drug tests were performed on the crews, and all but one tested negative. The conductor of 4059 East tested positive for crack cocaine in his system, a highly dangerous, addictive, and illegal substance that can cause an immediate and intense but short high. This can not only cause frequent abuse of the drug, but increased heart rate, high blood pressure, paranoia, anxiety, and other effects. It's not known how long it was in his system, but regardless, it was recent enough to cloud his judgment during work hours. Sadly, precautions like random drug and alcohol testing that should have detected this were already put in place since 1988. After a set of Conrail locomotives, operated by a crew stoned on marijuana, missed a stop signal and were rear-ended in Chase, Maryland by an Amtrak passenger train on January 4th, 1987. This crash was one of the few cases that unfortunately slipped between the cracks of regulations, so it's fair to say there is always room for improvement, even today. As a result of the FRA's findings, the probable cause was the crew of 4059 East's failure to follow signal aspects accordingly leading up to the collision. The conductor having crack cocaine in his system was also a contributing factor, as obviously a narcotic like that can affect one's ability to perform major tasks. However, the toxicology results can't draw any clear conclusions concerning either impairment, let alone when the drug was taken. The blood tests only contain the inactive elements which are not normally associated with impairment. Neither impairment nor time of exposure to the drug can also be derived from the urine tests. Still, it is worth noting. The sunlight factor and possible signal malfunction factors were also quickly dismissed, but not entirely out of left field. What do you think? After the accident, it was never stated what became of the train crew members of both trains involved, let alone if the conductor who tested positive for crack was given any criminal punishment. All the locomotives involved were amazingly repaired and returned to service, all except for the NREX 5473, which was scrapped shortly afterwards. Most of the BNSF-9s involved continue to serve under BNSF, either in their original liveries or repainted to the current H3 livery. BNSF 4479 and 4576 were among the units leased to BNSF by GECX. They were eventually returned to GE to be rebuilt and are now on Canadian National's fleet as AC-44C6Ms 3355 and 3397 respectively. Norfolk Southern 8967 was also rebuilt into an AC-44C6M, renumbered to 4208. FURX 8110 was sold off to Webb Asset Management and currently resides at the Kansas and Oklahoma Railroad as of 2017. BNSF 2437 was retired by BNSF in 2020 and sold to LTEX. It was last spotted in La Crosse, Wisconsin as of 2022. BNSF 7065 was retired in 2008 and sold to Helm Leasing, where it eventually ended up onto Norfolk Southern, renumbered to 3517. As of today, though, it has been rebuilt with a Norfolk Southern Admiral cab, now an SD40-3, numbered 6431. The accident ended up being one of many to lead to the nationwide installment of positive train control and other automatic braking systems. While in theory positive train control is meant to prevent these kind of accidents due to its GPS system that monitors train movements and will initiate braking if a train is going too fast toward a restrictive signal or points set against it or whatever, but many argue it brings more headache than good due to software troubles, operational headaches, and subsequent accidents such as a 3-train pileup on Norfolk Southern's Lehigh line just outside Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Some smaller railroads, even ones with multiple trains running within short intervals in signal territory, have been praised by the press for their safe handling of operations without the aid of positive train control, namely the Reading and Northern in eastern Pennsylvania, who excels in safe and effective train operations as if it were a choreographed dance routine. One aspect not mentioned, though, is cab signals. Cab signals were a technology introduced in the steam age, with a similar system in the United Kingdom also existing at the time called AWS, but cab signals were way more advanced. Whenever a train would pass a signal, it would appear on a display inside the cab of the lead locomotive. If it was clear, all you got was a light telling you so. Anything else, however, resulted in a loud, obnoxious whistle or buzzer that must be acknowledged, otherwise the train would come to a halt. While more reactive than preventative like positive train control, it would be a massive aid for crews in either adverse weather or glaring sunlight, as the crew of 4059 East claimed to have faced. If you couldn't see the signal from the outside, the cab signal certainly would, and would pass the word. Very few lines in the United States, though, still use cab signals today, banking more onto positive train control, or a blend of both in the form of Amtrak's ASYS system. Regardless, whether positive train control or cab signals could have prevented this accident, more than 19 years later, the legacy lives on in railroading and online, as the video clip has proven to be immensely popular online, being reshared and reposted countless times on YouTube or social media. Ryan's Colorado Rail Productions even did his own documentary on this incident, which to this day sports over 5.5 million views on his channel. Just a few thousand more than my most viewed video. It seems the story of this accident is going to remain fresh for a long time henceforward. A few days ago, I launched channel memberships. At the same time, I'm making new merch at my new TeePublic store with more designs already in the pipeline. It'll take a while for the designs to show up on the description of my channel, but there's a link down below if you want to check them out. But you may want to also check out the channel memberships too. 4 awesome people have already done so, with 5 tiers to choose from, starting from as low as $3 a month, allowing access to several perks, with you gaining more the higher you go. It's not really meant to replace Patreon, however, be sure to still give it a try. A special thanks also goes to Ryan's Colorado for inspiring my take on this well-known incident and helping with this video's creation. That is all. See you next time.